we know a lot about the African American electorate vis-a-vis Stacey Abrams,
Right.
but it was also the Asian American community that showed up strong in Georgia too, did they?
Yeah, there was about 265,000 more Asians voted between 2016 and 2020. And while we don't know exactly how they broke down, modeling suggests it might have been about 82 to 10 to 82 to 15. So um, that would suggest a couple 100,000 plus votes for the Democrats. Remember, Democrats got 600,000 more votes between 2016 and 2020.
Mhm.
And that Asian community, which is only 4% of Georgia, but that was a big chunk of votes. And remember, Joe Biden only won Georgia by 12,000 votes. And when an election is that close, everybody was the winning margin, right? I mean, the Black community, obviously winning margin, suburban white women winning margin, Asians winning margin, Latinos winning margin, and all of those had to turn out. And there was groups that were doing incredible work focused on each one of those communities. And one of the things that I've sort of really been talking about since the election is how important these on the ground organizers are, turning out the Asian vote or the Black vote in Georgia, or the Native American Indian vote in Arizona. These groups do more work to turn out votes at less cost than all those fancy consultants with their TV ads and their direct mail. And quite frankly, it's almost distressing to me seeing the amount of money that was just pissed away on TV ads that don't change any votes, that don't build any kind of lasting infrastructure, when you have these groups literally talking to non-voters and getting them to turn out when they're struggling just to raise $10,000 here, $15,000 there. And then you have campaigns dropping tens and hundreds of millions of dollars on TV ads. So I'd love to see a shift in progressive giving. You still campaigns need a basic amount, but when Jamie Harrison raises 58 or 60, $58 million, and he's asking for money the weekend before the election for more TV ads that didn't change a single vote, I'd rather have seen that money be spent on these groups doing that on the ground organizing, because they're the ones that are literally dragging people to the polls.
Spoke with Rachel Bitterkoff the other day, and she became famous for predicting the 2018 so well. But she said the same thing to me, how the Democrats, once again, and it's like all of us tend to be on the same page these days, getting away from this consultant stuff, putting money in communities and matter on the ground. And she was stressing how important that is in Georgia. Otherwise, this will be another blown opportunity. And obviously you'd agree. I'm not sure yet. I mean, I know groups that, put it this way, just like in what you described, a lot of our groups do what they need to do, Marcos, in spite of the consultant class. They just go ahead and do it. They don't wait on a consultant class. But imagine if a lot of our groups had even more on the ground support and investment, they could be even more effective, couldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, you look at these, the person we were interviewing on the brief this week's The Brief. Her name's Aisha, and she is the director of what was the name? The Asian American Advocacy Fund, and shoestring budget. And they think they called almost every single Asian American living in the greater Atlanta area. And so you're looking at 260,000 new Asian American votes from 2016 to 2020, overwhelmingly went for Biden. And you have by far the winning margin. This group doesn't exist. You probably don't get enough of those Asians to create that 12,000 vote buffer. And that goes for every organization that is doing this sort of in the ground community work in Georgia, targeting the Black community, the Latino community, young voters as well. And right now there's groups that are focused on registering voters who turned 18 in the middle, right? In this 2-month frame, right? There's 20-some thousand voters. These numbers matter when something is going to be as close as it looks like it's going to be. So that is money that actually literally is getting votes. You fund these organizations, it is translating to votes. We saw that in Arizona, where Biden won it by 10,000 votes. The Native community provided probably about 100,000 vote margin for Joe Biden. And if you look at a map of where American Indians live in Arizona, it is literally blue. It is the overlay of the counties of the areas that Joe Biden won.
Mhm.
That was the margin of victory. And so we can talk about the importance of suburban white women, and I don't ever want to discount them, because they also delivered the margin of victory, right? But you needed all these groups, and if we didn't turn out our core communities of color, if we didn't turn out youth vote, the youth vote was 60%, I think, higher than than the previous record. If those don't turn out, Joe Biden is not president. And if we invest more in those organizations that are doing this great work, we may be, Arizona and Georgia can start becoming more like Colorado and Virginia. They were red states that became competitive for about 2 cycles, and then boom, now they're safely blue states, or core base Democratic states. And so we can do that in Arizona, in Georgia, if we support these groups targeting the Native vote and Asian vote, the Black vote, Latino vote. Obviously, the same thing in Texas. Now, in Georgia, it's happened. It's no accident that 600,000 more Democratic votes sort of popped up between 2016 and 2020. It wasn't just, oops, here they are, 600,000. Like Stacey Abrams led that charge to invest in those on-the-ground Georgia organizations. And talking to the Asian American Advocacy Fund, they got their start working with Stacey Abrams, right? So you had somebody who had that magnetic ability to draw people in and their money. And wow, like a red state, a slight red state became a purple state pretty much overnight. And so that can happen. I mean, we continue to make gains in Texas. We didn't win it this year, but it's getting closer and closer. And Democrats at the party level didn't put an investment in Texas, because Biden didn't need Texas. And so he's not going to spend his time and enough of his money to really fight for it. But it went from being a 15-point Romney state to a 9-point. Trump the first time only won it by 9. This time Trump won it by 6, right? So it's moving gradually in our direction, and people are doing this long-term organizing and building and getting people registered and turning out to vote. It's going to be probably next, I'm sure 4 years from now, it is a legitimate purple state. This time it was on the teetering, it was on the brink, right? It is now a legitimate purple state. Iowa's not a purple state anymore. Iowa's a red state. Ohio's a red state. I mean, they've gone the way of Missouri. So we have to sort of shift our thinking and our expectations away from the old maps to these new maps. And the reason that Iowa and Ohio are no longer purple states, it's because they're all white. They are very, very white states. I mean, you think Ohio might think of Cleveland, right? But no, Ohio is a very white state. And the states that are sort of becoming the new battlegrounds are all insanely diverse, like Georgia, Texas, Arizona. And Mark, I keep saying this, nobody believes me, but South Carolina and Mississippi, they're next. They're next. After Texas, South Carolina and Mississippi, demographically, they are they're not, because there's not a lot of investment there yet, but they are moving slightly in our direction. And if people did the kind of work that they did in Georgia, Mississippi can be a purple state. It's 40% African American. And the reason it's so solidly Republican is because, one, that Black community doesn't vote at its percentage of the population. It underperforms. And white voters in Mississippi are like 90% Republican. Right. I mean, there's like some whites that live in some of the cities, right? They'll be more liberal, but anybody that's living outside of the cities and is white in Mississippi is Republican. But again, that's a demographic that's exiting the electorate, right? I mean, they're older, they're dying off. Younger white Mississippians aren't as Republican. And obviously the Black community is growing. There's a small but growing Latino community. these numbers are making these states competitive, but not by accident. Nobody's focusing. I mean, not nobody. There are groups in Mississippi, but they're severely underfunded. Like there's no Stacey Abrams in
Right.
Mississippi yet.
Right. Right.
Right. Georgia was lucky that they had Stacey Abrams. Texas is lucky that they had Beto. Beto's doing amazing work organizing, right? So they have these high-profile figures that are really bringing a lot of money and attention into organizing those states. We need that in South Carolina. Maybe it'll be Jamie Harrison. We need that although Jamie Harrison, everything I'm hearing, he's going to be DNC chair.
Okay.
That's the word coming down from people that are in the DNC itself. Mississippi, like we don't have that high profile figure that can really rally nationally. But those are states that can and will move in our direction if there's a proper investment in it. And remember that we're stuck in this world where rural small states get a disproportionate voice in our politics, definitely in the presidency, but especially in the Senate. So if any of these states that are right now Republican held, if we can start chipping away at those and making them competitive at the Senate level, you start getting closer to evening out that imbalance. And so Georgia, we're going from two red senators, two Republican senators, to hopefully two blue senators, two Democrats overnight. That's the kind of changes that can happen, but obviously we need to work in them. And these organizations on the ground are doing that work.